The type of attention you get and who you get it from determines where we end up in life.
We always got.
This has already been accepted at the University of Texas in Austin, electrical
In a
engineering.
community where the statistics aren't the best, the default isn't the best either.
The gentleman who's going to be on the field representing South San,
Defensive captain of the varsity football team.
Mr. Jesus
Giving
Rendon.
his life to giving back to this community.
St. Joseph's Catholic Church Choir.
So I decided to start a nonprofit called Building a Purpose.
And if we can raise that default to be something of higher standards,
Help students find their purpose in life.
I think we can do something
We all we need.
special by doing.
Welcome to the Rendon podcast, where we talk about life, purpose, and God. Today we are recording out of the Rec Podcast Studio, and our next guest is Mr. Geremy Landin, who is the former Maestro nonprofit executive director and the founder of Lumos and Rise. Jeremy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. So I am glad that I'm here, glad to talk with you. And I'm not the founder of Rise, but I am the first executive director. The group of founders are some really interesting people who have been involved in the salsa world for a long time, but I'm sure we'll kind of get into that. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, I'd like to start these off by going through a few questions. What was your first recollection of how we first met?
Yeah, so how did we first meet? I think from what I remember, I was running for city council a little over 5 years ago. And I remember having a conversation probably with Andy Castillo, and I was meeting with all the neighborhood associations, and he said, here are the people you need to meet. You need to meet Jesus. You need to meet Miss Mendez from Mendez Cafe. You need to meet Al. So there were a list of people, and I think the focus was, how do we keep people from forgetting that we exist here in the Quintana neighborhood? And so you all were the people to talk to about that. And now, fast forward, look where we're at. So I guess that, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to see stuff come out of that. And I've definitely seen the growth here in the Quintana neighborhood.
Yeah, I remember Andy and Al. Who else had met with you? I think I was the last one to meet with you, and you came by the house, and it was an interesting race. That race was, but I think this momentum coming in here has really grown, and like you said, you see a lot of the development. Yeah.
No, I can see it, and even just sitting in this space, or understanding the history of this space and knowing what it started as and what it's come to now is just a way for me to see, that there's growth always.
Right.
We just have to pay attention to what it is that the community needs.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your timeline. I sent you that worksheet, and what we normally do in that is we give our guests an opportunity to go through it each year of their life and share an impactful event, positive or negative.
Yeah.
And so, feel free to jump in and go in as much depth or as vague as you see fit.
Yeah. So I think, if I were to go back, and this is crazy, right? Because I'm 30 this year. So my years are always aligned. My birthday is New Year's Eve. So at the end of my year is the end of everyone's year. But yeah, for me, it's been really impactful to see that in 10 years, if I just look at the last 10 years, I've done everything from run for office a couple of times, served on boards and commissions. I've run actually now multiple nonprofits, 3. I've consulted and worked with over 100 businesses in multiple capacities, mostly through my last role. And, I've raised, I think, in that time alone, somewhere over like $3 or $4 million for organizations. And I don't say that as a props to me. I say that I did not have any clue that I was going to be doing any of this stuff. I thought I would be in the medical field, right? Like that was my intent. My undergrad degree is exercise science. My master's degree is public history. And I thought originally thought I was going to go in the medical field. Then I got the history degree and thought, I'm going to work for a cultural arts organization, or I'm going to work for, something like that. And then I ended up advising small businesses and working in narrative change for a large foundation and doing work like that, working at the Hispanic Chamber. So it's just been a crazy 10 years, honestly. and now I'm in this spot where it feels like I'm rising again, right, into another journey, and I'm happy with it. I'm happy with where it's going. If you want to talk timeline, I started, leaving St. Mary's University, running for office around the time that I was doing my master's degree. That was when I ran for city council the first time, and then moved on from there. Went to go work for the county after that. Went to the H.E. Butt Foundation, working for one of the family foundations that resulted from the family that founded H.E.B., the grocery store. And then going over to my last organization, working with entrepreneurs and helping advocate on behalf of entrepreneurs for almost 3 years. So it's been a lot in a short time frame, I think. But I still have work to do.
What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up, actually, it's funny because I think people right away will be like, "Oh, you're from the West Side." And I'm like, "Well, I'm now from the West Side. I've been here, most of my life. I think I can say that now. But I grew up on the Southeast Side. I grew up near Highlands High School. I went to Forbes Elementary School, which I think is now Steele, but it still has the word Forbes up there. Then I went to Rogers Middle School, and then I was supposed to go to Highlands High School. And somewhere along the way, I took the unique path over to Fox Tech High School for the magnet program in health, in medical, right? Like I thought I was going to go into healthcare. And that is when I met the West Side, if you want to say it that way. So I met these people, students, fellow students, and just thought, y'all are interesting. And was introduced to, a different type of culture. And it might seem funny or silly to people to think, what does that mean? You live in the same city. But there's different cultures that live across our city. Even here in Quintana compared to, the West Side or the Southeast Side, there's different ways we approach things. And so when I got to the West Side, I loved it. That is what led me to St. Mary's University, because it was still west of downtown, and I was kind of embedding myself. And then I met the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, which I think embedded me even further into the history of the West Side, trying to get a better understanding. And then I bought my house. Right, I was 23. I bought my house here on the West Side, and there's very few other ways to invest that way. And so I bought my house and invested in my community and my home, and now I'm there. But it all stemmed from growing up on the Southeast Side, and being with my parents, and my mom was, very big on school and education, and so that's what led me to these other places, right? I think it all comes together some way. There's a way to get it all to work, in a way that harmonizes with each other, right? It was family and community that led to family and community in this space. So yeah, I think I went a little bit off the question a little bit, but
no, you grew your childhood formational in who you are today, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it made a huge difference. I had a big family. There's a lot of us. If I count all the extended siblings and everyone, there's 10 of us total, I think. But in the house that I grew up in, there were 5 or 6 at the time. So a lot of siblings, mostly sisters at the time. And my parents at the time were construction. They worked in construction, and that taught me a lot. So I definitely am not afraid to, do the things that I need to do myself. But I also knew from their persistence on education, like I need to work on making sure that I have what I need for the future, right? I think that's why I invest back in other people and in other organizations, because we can't do it alone. If I sat here and said I did it all by myself, I'd be lying, right? And I think that's what my hope is to continue helping people grow in that way, using that, that knowledge.
You shared a story with me a while back about you riding the transit bus system to school every day, right? How do you think that shaped how you saw San Antonio at such a young age?
Yeah, I took the 82 and the 84 bus. So that was from the area, Rogers Highlands area. You know, it would come across what was then Lighthouse for the Blind. I don't remember what the new name of it is now, but it would cross through there, and I'd see the golf course, and then I'd come up to downtown to the Red Library, right? Years later, I become a board member of that same library system, right? So that's a $43 million budget organization. It's either 30 or 40 branches. Anyway, so I'd stop there at that library. I'd cross the street and end up at Fox Tech High School. And along the way, like on these routes, you know, taking public transportation in any city, I've learned, is one of the best ways to get to know your city. Especially if you're a kid that falls asleep on the bus at some point in time or the other, you will end up going from the southeast side near Rogers Middle School all the way north towards who knows where as a kid, freaking out, calling your parents. But it showed me a lot. I got to meet people who I'd never meet, you know, otherwise. Don't talk to strangers, but I did. And, you know, you get to understand that perspectives are different, right? As a kid, you're in this echo chamber. Everybody kind of sees the same thing because you're around the same people. On public transportation, on the bus, you're coming across people with varying backgrounds and varying existences, right? So I learned a lot. I think I learned a lot. And you can't really, you learn too, being on the bus, you can't really judge people. You may take the bus because you're eco-friendly. You may take the bus for religious reasons. You may take the bus because you just feel like taking the bus that day. I mean, but I think there's always been sort of a misperception about bus riders and public transportation. But, you know, I just talked to you earlier about I've visited, I don't know how many different states in the last few months, and public transportation seems to be a popular thing in other places. Here, it's kind of silly that we're one of the largest cities in the country, and like people take the bus what feels like out of necessity rather than because there's enjoyment for public transportation here. But yeah, the bus changed my perspective on people. It let me see different sides of San Antonio I don't think I would have seen until later. And I interacted, I think, and met quite a few people that I think were interesting to me. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting to me because most of the young adults or even older teenagers who I know who rode the bus system are often very motivated or very driven people. And I think a lot of that stems from having that built-in repetition of, if you want to get somewhere, you've got to put the work in to get there. And that's something that's always stuck with me when I thought about when you first told me, and I was like, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I was having a conversation once with Susana from the Esperanza Center, and she, I think, asked me about my background or you know, what jobs I've had and stuff. And I told her the longest job I have ever had, and still to this day, it was 5 years that I worked at Olive Garden. And she said, "This makes more sense." She was like, "This makes sense." She said, "Anyone who's worked in service industry like that, who's worked, you know, as a server, as a waiter, as a, you know, busboy, as whatever, has a different way about approaching work." And I never really thought about it that way. But ever since she told me that, it made me stop to think, like, man, you're right. Like, I've never had to stand on my feet so long, talk to so many people in one day, you know, multitask so much at once, other than when I was working in, you know, any sort of service industry. So yeah, riding the bus, working at a restaurant, doing sales, any sort of sales at some point in time in your life or other, it makes a huge difference in the way you approach work, in the way you approach work ethic. Yeah, and you can't be an entrepreneur, you can't be someone who works for yourself unless you're willing to get up every morning and do it yourself, because nobody's holding you accountable to it. It's just you. So I think all those things trained me for what I was going to do later.
Yeah. What's the best thing you learned from your time at Olive Garden?
What is the best thing I learned from my time at Olive Garden?
Which one was it that you worked at?
The one here in Sarsamora and
on military.
On military.
Oh, so when it was brand new.
When it was brand new. So 2014.
It seems like it was
new.
It was
built in 2012, I think.
Okay.
And I graduated high school in Wait, yeah, I graduated high school in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there from the time I turned, I think it was 16, all the way up until 20. I don't know, 20 or 21, something like that. Sporadically at times, but I was always an employee up until
Yeah.
my sophomore,
So
junior year
maybe
of
you
college.
didn't pick up as many hours or whatever.
Yeah, but there was one point where I would go in at 2 a.m. and do counts,
2
like
a.m.?
inventory counts.
They have staff there that early?
On one day a week when the truck comes in and they unload the truck, you've got to get there early enough to still do the inventory counts, stock everything up, and prepare all the bases for all the sauces and soups and all those things before the start of the week, right? So I'd get there at 2 or 3 in the morning, and there were some days that I would go at 2 or 3 in the morning and I wouldn't leave until midnight or 1 a.m. because the last shift would finish all the way till
24
then.
hours you
So
were
I
there.
had worked once. One day I recollect having worked
23
22
hours.
or 23. I mean, I still had to take a lunch break or something,
Yeah.
so less. But yeah, I would just say the whole day.
Jeez.
Yeah. It was an interesting time. And honestly, I've told people this before. I wouldn't dislike working at Olive Garden. Like, I just don't. Yeah, there's something interesting that you get out of working in an industry like that that can be energizing at times. It's exhausting, but it's fun.
Do you know Chantel?
I think so.
She's the GM there now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I know it was she's from the neighborhood too, and
That name sounds
I think
so...
she started. I feel like she started there when it first opened because we were already living in Austin. I think when it opened.
Okay.
And I was curious because she's worked her way up there. But
okay.
No, that's interesting to see that you've you stay there for that's been the longest tenure you've had at one place, huh?
Yeah. My last job was 3 years, so
Yeah.
that was post that, but yeah, 5 years there, and I met a lot of people. I learned a lot of things. I think that's been my I'll say my trick, right? People will ask like, how do you know this or how do you know that? And I'm like, you can't leave any experience without learning something. If you do and you leave, cold-hearted from whatever that experience is, then it was a waste. If you leave and you've learned something from it, then you've done something good. So
Right.
I think that's been my trick along the way, is like, I don't go into anything assuming I'm going to hate it. I go into things assuming it's time for me to learn something new. And that doesn't always happen, but if you go in with that intent, I think it changes things.
Right.
Yeah.
What made you interested in running for office?
So I'm going to start by saying I hated writing as a kid. I hated writing in college, and I hated writing for many, many years. But what got me interested in running for office was that I wrote something that I never expected to write. I wrote, if you've looked at the San Antonio report, I think at the time, by this point, it was already Rivard. It was still Rivard report. They do these Where I Live pieces. And I had reached out to Councilwoman Shirley Gonzalez at the time, who was the councilwoman in District 5, who has since termed out, and we now have Terry Castillo in office. But Shirley, I reached out to, and I said, hey, I'm finishing my master's in history. I love history. I love the West Side. I have learned to learn who my neighbors and my community are here. And you have a vacancy on the Historic Design and Review Commission. In short, that commission's job is to make decisions on historical properties, requests, zonings, things like that. Many times you'll hear of them whenever somebody wants to knock down a building within the city. So I go to her and I say, I want to serve on this committee. I have the time. It's a long time commitment. I have the ability to do research, and I'm a resident here in this community, and I want to be civically engaged. And I heard nothing. And so
You reached out to her office.
I reached out to her office. I think I even reached out to her personally, at an event or something. I walked up to her and talked to her. And I felt ignored. I was like, hey, what's going on here? Nobody's on this committee. And the longer nobody sits on that committee, the longer the community that we represent doesn't have a voice being heard on that committee. And I really didn't get a response. And so I started writing this Where I Live article about Prospect Hill, which is where I live. And in writing it, I thought to myself, I think I need to be a little honest about this and say, hey, this is where I live. This is my community. And also, this is who represents me. And the person who represents me right now hasn't even responded to me wanting to serve my community in some way. So that's also a part of where I live, right? And
So they left it in, the editor and
oh yeah,
everything?
I put that in there, and they left it there. And but I knew then, it was kind of that idea of like, I didn't say it so bluntly. I
Mhm.
just kind of said I wanted to serve, but I couldn't serve. I think I said it very openly.
Okay.
But you could tell the intention
Mhm.
behind it, and that led me to think for a second. Wait, she may not have responded to me, but she's terming out soon. Um, and I want to be responsive to people. I can do it differently. So I said, you know what? I'll run for that seat. And that's what led me to run for that seat. It was a mixture of a love for the community and a want to be engaged, but it was also I want to do things differently, right?
Mhm.
I want to show that if somebody reaches out, I'm going to respond. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say, because no politician is perfect. I'm not going to say that she never, addressed community concerns and things. But in that case, in my case, she didn't. And so I made it a point to say, well, if you're not going to, I'm going to. Um, I was only, I don't remember how many, but very few votes away from making it to the runoff. There were, 13, I think 12 or 13 candidates in that race. And I had out fundraised everybody, and I got, the Express News endorsement. I think I got a few other endorsements. And, unfortunately, I just didn't make it. So it didn't work out. But in the long run, I think what that did for me was I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about the West Side. Um, I learned a lot about politics that I didn't ever want to learn. And it led me to all the roles that came after, right? As people saw, wait a second, you did this,
Mhm.
and even if you don't make it, I realized at some point, majority of the world will never run for political office. It's like this very tiny percentage, right? It's probably less than 1%. Um, but I did.
Mhm.
So I took it as a, you know what, this was again another time to learn something. This was a win. So I'm happy that I did it.
Nice.
Yeah.
You talked about that article. I remember seeing you write that I remember seeing the Where I Live, because I remember in 2018, I think, when they first started doing it, Judith did one for the Quintana neighborhood. And after that election, you also went to go work for under Terry, right? Terry Castillo's office, and you wrote an article there too.
She appointed me. I never worked for her, but she did
Mm.
appoint me to the library board. So that's the
Sure.
board that I was referring to, and I served on that board, I think, about 2 years. And so I did reference the councilwoman's office a couple times when I wrote the pieces. I think I wrote one about West Side libraries. I wrote one about West Side parks and the need to invest in our parks. Um, and she was always very supportive of like, hey, you have projects and things that you want to work on. Let's work on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and not even because of me. Like it was like, hey, you're hearing from community members or you heard while you ran for office about these things. I tell people all the time, if you run for office and you leave running for office and you think that all those people who ran at the same time as you are your enemies, then you ran for office for the wrong reason, because they're not your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, and yes, some people don't have the best intentions, but if you think about it, all of those people ran for office with the hopes to do something for this community, right? They may not be guided the right way. That's okay sometimes, but the the base layer there, the base, want that was being addressed is this need to do something for the community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't doubt that everyone who ran for office wanted to do something for the community. Um, so when Terry won her race, won our race, uh, I said, "Great, what can I do? Please put me to work." Like, you won. That means that the community wants what your vision is. Now, what can I serve on? What can in what capacity can I act on
Mm-hmm.
behalf of this community? And, knowing my history, my background in history, and my love for music, I think I had posted some articles that I'd written on West Side music. Um, She put me on the library board. I think I was also a part of the 2017 bond housing commission. So there were a few projects that came under that. I served independently just through Prospect Hill, not through Terry, on the West Side Creeks Oversight Restoration Committee. And in the years since then, I've served on multiple committees and campaigns and things. So I used my running for office and that Where I Live article as a, you know, a launch pad for all the things that I did later. Yeah.
No, well said. I mean, too bad we don't have more politicians who can lose gracefully and be part of the solution instead of maintaining the division afterwards, right? Because there used to be a time, I don't know, there's always a time for anything, because the pendulum swings one way and it swings right back over. There's a time where it was about unity, right? You know, we are the United States of America, right? I mean, well said. I like that. I like that piece that you just elaborated on, and that article you wrote about Terry. I think the headlines was something about how you can work with her even after losing her. I don't remember what.
Oh, that was another one that I wrote. Yeah,
that's the one I was referencing. Right?
Yeah. No, I do remember that one, and it was. I think it was a long Facebook post, but it was a Facebook post that was like, "Hey, we just had." I think at that time there were so many open seats. And there were so many hot contested races that there were like over 100 people running for office or something crazy like that, some number that was very high in Bexar County in San Antonio. If all of those people who ran for office and the ones who lost and said, you know what, now I'm going to use the little bit of platform that I pulled out of this to do something, we could do so much as a city. But instead what happens is you lose a race, and a lot of times they disappear. Someone will disappear, or they'll become spiteful at the person who won and try to just, as much as they can, reduce them down. And it does nothing for us.
Right.
It does the opposite. It makes people think that this is how we are anyway, right? That we fight with each other. And so, yeah, I was very intentional about, I want to work with you and I want you to work with me, and I'm going to bug you until you put me to work. Otherwise, the same reason why I ran for office the last time is the same reason I would run again. And her team has always been very kind to me and very open. And, you know, there are policy decisions and things that I see sometimes that I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. But again, you address those at the ballot box. You address those when you vote. And we're seeing a shift in local, regional, and national politics right now based on that. People are actually seeing how much their vote impacts. And I think it goes through waves. For years we had very low turnout, and now we're getting very high turnout. And what impact does that have on elections and voting? I think that's what we're starting to see.
Right. Yeah. Where did you learn that? Where did you learn that trait of not losing gracefully, but still turning it into something professional? Because it's easy to try to tear down the process or delegitimize the other person.
Yeah. Thinking about it, I have no clue where that came from. I think at some point I thought to myself, well, one, I have a lot of sisters. So you lose you lose a lot when you have a lot of sisters. Okay. And my mom is very strong-willed. So I also don't win very often with her. But at some point you have to realize, like, am I going to constantly, feel victimized to something, or am I going to use it as a path forward, right? And I know it sounds very metaphorical and very, philosophical or something, but I think it's really simple. Stuff happens. That's it. Stuff happens, right? If you let stuff happen and you let it affect everything that you are working with and going through, then it's not going to be great. If you let stuff happen and you learn from it and you move on from it, then things can be better. And I think that's as simple as it is.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you talked about your career and your advancements and, using an article as a kind of a jumping board. And what are some other instances of those jumping boards that you've had in your career from one role to the other? And a lot of them, even you mentioned at the beginning, you weren't traditionally trained to do some of those things, but those are important. Those are important levers. I'd like to zoom in on a little bit.
Yeah, I think I will tell you this. You and me sitting here across from each other, I like this type of interaction more than I enjoy a table filled with people. But I have come across to people as somebody who would rather be in a room full of people. And honestly, at some point, I had to tell myself, and there's people all the time that tell me, I just don't like being around all crowds and I don't like being in big spaces and whatever. I didn't either. I don't, right? Like, that's not my preference. But I have learned that when you find, at some point, I found that when you're able to relate with somebody and they're able to relate with you, you never know what will come from that. Well, over the years, I've come across people who, if you get to know them a little bit deeper and you get to understand who they are and what they are and why they are, then they will, even just out of interest, support what you're doing, because it's not a transaction anymore. Now it's people, right? So I think about, in grade school, I met certain teachers along the way that I stayed in contact with. And now here I am 20 years later, and they're still supporting me through things. I think about in high school, I was going through a lot in my life personally, and there was a coach or someone else, teachers, educators, people who have taught me certain things, even just not even people who are trained or certified teachers, have had the biggest impact on me. And every single one of those people was another one of those tipping points that led me into whatever the next thing was. My job at the H.E. Butt Foundation, when I went to go do narrative change work at the H.E. Butt Foundation, working on Know Your Neighbor, that was a connection from Patty Radel, who then a year later or 2 years later told me, I would support you running for office. Like, I didn't expect that.
She's
right?
a legend, man.
She is. And again, right, it's stewardship. So that word, I will tell you that has probably been one of the biggest turning points for me. Is when I was a student at St. Mary's University. Every university has some version of what St. Mary's calls phonathon, which is where once a year they put a bunch of students in a room and offer them a job to call alumni and say, hey, you're an alum now, maybe you have a little bit of extra cash, can you donate to the university? And after I did that, right, I spent some time on the phone doing that with alum. We had something called Stewardship Week. And I was like, what in the world is stewardship? And silly enough, right, like said something like, oh, like the people on the plane. No. We had Stewardship Week. And I said, what is this? And they said, this is the week that all those people who y'all called and asked for money, everyone who gave you money, and even everyone who didn't, you were going to write them a card and say, thank you for talking with me. Thank you for donating. Thank you for talking with me. Thank you for supporting me. And I thought, why? Why even the people who didn't give money? And they said, because they gave you their time, and that is their money. And not only that, that's their, that is them. They're giving of themselves, right? And I said, okay, that's interesting. So I started looking up this concept of stewardship. And when I got a better understanding of it, this idea of being grateful even in times where you did not get what exactly you were looking for or wanted, that gratefulness, I would see people receive a card in the mail after not giving any money, but they'd get that card in the mail, and we'd see the little update of that person now donated $1,000 to the university. We asked on the phone, they said no. But they got a card in the mail saying, thank you for your time. And they said, I got a handwritten card in the mail from you. I'm going to donate $1,000. Since then, since that stewardship week, I have always preached stewardship to people and said, you need to say thank you. It does not matter if it was the smallest gesture. If you received somebody's time, if you can, and you remember, and it's timely enough, because the other thing is you don't want to go say thank you a year later, but if it is timely enough, say thank you in a way that is meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be, the same thing, send a card or whatever, but whatever you find as meaningful, say thank you. And so there are friends that I have, just this morning, I sent somebody a text message that said, hey, I just want you to know I value you and I hope you have a great day. and they hearted the message and went on with their day.
Yeah, I
right?
hearted it too.
But
I got the same. You called me Alexa or whatever.
yeah, that was probably it. But yeah, like I send those messages because I've also realized that when you do that, one, it changes somebody's day. That's a positive. That's a plus. But the other thing is, it can shift a lot for a person, and it can shift a lot for you. If you can show them gratefulness, you are in a way showing yourself some gratefulness. And so, if there's any one thing, if I ever leave somebody with a piece of advice, it is to learn good stewardship, and you know, and do it in a way that is meaningful to you. You're going to look online and it'll tell you to send cards, to send a gift card, to, go in person, to shake somebody's hand a certain way, all these things. Do it the way that is comfortable to you, because that person is going to appreciate your self coming out of that gift of stewardship. Do it the way that makes sense to you. I've sent cards, I've called people, I've checked in, I've invited people to things. It works. It works. And it's never with the intent. Never do it with the intent that you get something back from it later. Do it with the intent that you want to be kind to somebody. And if it's meant to be that something comes out of that, it'll come out of it. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Well said. I like that. You talk about your experience and your time at the HEB Butt Foundation. Now that I think about it, that's almost very historic, documenting kind of related. Would you consider that the most closely tied to your education training that you went to, or what did you learn there?
I think in my time at the HE Butt Foundation, I learned about myself quite a bit. The know your neighbor.
What is the Know Your Neighbor?
Yeah, so Know Your Neighbor is a project of the HE Butt Foundation. If you have ever heard of Family Camp or Lady Lodge, or there's different camps out in Leakey, Texas, out an hour out of Kerrville. That foundation, for the longest of its existence, existed to service those camps, right, and to bring people from underserved communities to be able to experience the hill country, right? That's probably the most condensed way I could explain that. Know Your Neighbor is an initiative that started a few years ago with the intent of really sharing with all of San Antonio, all of our community here, that there are different experiences lived, even though we're in the same city, and all of those experiences are meaningful and impactful. And instead of us shoving down your throat, this is why you should care about these issues, we're going to tell you stories. We're going to bring people together. We're going to facilitate gatherings and togetherness in a different way, so that you can understand for yourself how experiences vary from zip code to zip code. That is probably the easiest way that I could explain Know Your Neighbor. And the concept, right? The phrase Know Your Neighbor it's meaningful, because let's look at what's happening around our city. You see what's happening with the Frost Bank Center. What was, when I was growing up, the AT&T Center. I think even before that, like SBCs. Was it like
Southwestern
SBC?
Bell Center,
yeah. There are people who may live near there who generationally have been in that area for decades and benefited and lost from the creation of that space at some point. And then there are people who live, in Dignity Hill, who may be well off now and have money and have the ability to renovate and do all these great projects. Do they know each other? Right? Like, do those neighbors know the other's experience?
Mm-hmm.
Do you take the time anymore, the way that it seems we used to back, many years ago, to get to know who your neighbor is? Like, just base layer. Do you know who your neighbor is? The reality is, in many cases, the answer is no. In Quintana, I feel like you all know each other pretty well.
You have the best neighbors here.
Y'all have the best neighbors. Don't tell my neighbors at Prospect Hill I like them. But it's just this idea that if you reach out and put your hand out and get to know somebody, you will get to understand their experiences, and maybe you will do things differently. And it's never, know your neighbor was never like, let's make you vote differently, let's make you see things differently. It's never a forceful act. It's always you may come into this space, you may learn something and you may meet somebody, or you may come into the space and you may not learn somebody. I mean, you may not meet somebody, you may not learn something about them. It is up to what you put into it. And over time, you can see the shift. You can see people changing the way that they think about things. And this was all before, our shift in national politics, right? They started this initiative years ago. And
that's what I was going to ask, because we saw you mentioned Know Your Neighbor, where I live for the Rivard report, now the San Antonio report. You mentioned the storytelling initiative from the H.E.B. Butt Foundation, and then also KSET started doing the Know Your Neighbor segments where they go look into these things. And what order or sequence to your best recollection do you think they started, and you think they influenced each other?
So yes and no. From what I remember, Where I Live was first. Know Your Neighbor came after Where I Live, and then Know Your Neighborhood, which kicked off with Westwood Square. Yeah, Westwood Square was probably the last of the initiatives, of those three initiatives. At one point, I remember, and I think Patton will agree with this recollection. Patton was one of my supervisors at the H.E. Butt Foundation, and I said, Patton, look at these articles, these Where I Lives. We're talking about narrative change. Like, I think it would be so cool if we did something like this or partnered. And I think at the time he might have told me something like, I don't know, we kind of talked about the writing style and stuff, and it kind of ended there. And when I left the H.E. Butt Foundation, I remember seeing now there's sponsorships from the H.E. Butt Foundation, from Know Your Neighbor, for if you write a Where I Live article and you qualify for it, you'll get paid, right? You receive a stipend of $250, I think. And so that was cool, because I was like, hey, I remember when we talked about this.
Yeah.
And then Know Your Neighborhood was, one of those things that Steve Spriester was working on before he left KSAT. And it, similarly, I think that over time people have become interested in their neighbors, right? There has been more of an interest, and I think we started to see this shift regionally a few years ago, and it's really just grown as our culture expands, right? Like, I talked to you earlier about Bad Bunny putting salsa on a global spotlight, or putting it on a global stage. For that to be the case, people who are not of any sort of, I'm going to get in trouble for which word I choose here, but Hispanic or Latin American or Mexican American, whatever background, let's say Spanish speaking background, there's definitely, it wasn't 4.2 billion Spanish speaking people that watched the Super Bowl halftime show, right? Yet we have this interest of people from all backgrounds to understand and enjoy and experience this music together, right? I think more people are becoming, it's interesting as we see that more are interested in and able to show just how indifferent they are of each other. We are also seeing just how much people are caring for one another in a different way. I think because it's so extreme on one side, it's also a very extreme on the other side. Because you can see it more clearly now when people are showing their care for someone else, and when they're showing their lack of care for someone else. So I think over time it has shifted, and that's what's caused a bit of this interest in who is my neighbor, who is the person that lives next to me, who's the person that I mean, I think about, I'll leave it at this, but when I was working at the county commissioner's office, at Commissioner Clay Flores' office, one of the things she was working on was helping, I think it was Von Ormy, get the access to water out there. I had no clue there were still communities that didn't have running water, that was not well water. Yet they're this close to our city. Well, imagine what that experience is like for them, right? And even when she was able to get the water out there, right, like to fund that project, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know where this ended because I left shortly after, but the customers would still have to pay from the street to the house. And in some, just to dig a hole is going to cost you several $1,000s just to get it prepared.
Mm-hmm.
There were some people who I think said it would cost them $20, $30, $40,000 just to get the access from
Down
the
the
street to
easement,
their home,
yeah.
down the easement. Yeah. So, and even at that, if there's an issue with it, that's on you, you know?
Right,
So,
right.
and Von Ormy's not, you know, census tract wise is one of the lower census tract zip codes. So it's not like people are just, you know, flooding with money out there. But there are people in San Antonio who don't know that that exists out there, that there are people without running water close enough for you to drive, you know, that don't have access.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy to me. When I ran for office, I knocked on doors that I could see dirt floor on some of their floors. Like their floor was a dirt floor.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could not believe that that existed. And people are like, no, that only exists in third world countries and stuff. No. That exists here, like
Yeah.
within a mile radius from my house. So we have to pull our heads out of the sand sometimes and understand that as much as you may think you have it bad, if you're going through something, somebody down the street from you has it 10 times worse. And somebody down the street from them has it 10 times worse than them. So taking those experiences, understanding people in that way, I think has made a big difference for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well said. And I man, we used to have a well in the back of my grandma's house. And you know, these neighborhoods, when Judith and I went to Europe for our pilgrimage, we saw like ancient, right? It's like thousands of years old. It put into perspective where I was like, man, these houses over here, the house I live in is 100 years old, right? And you know, back in those days, it was all wells, right? It hasn't been that long since for us having those basic utilities. So yeah, it is a little bit of a shock and realization where you're like, oh wow, there used to be a well there. They capped it. The irony. But well said. Great. I like the way you described how you saw the progression of this movement to really get to know your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
What after that? Is that when you made the big jump to Maestro? Is it the
Let's
H.E.B.
see.
Butt Foundation?
From the H.E. Butt Foundation, the Maestro was one of those organizations that was a partner in the foundation at the time had a program that was a capacity building cohort for nonprofits, and the Maestro was one of the people who was in that program then. And I was sitting there in the office, and I remember seeing the former executive director walk through, and that's when I understood, like, oh, they don't have an executive director. And so I applied for that role, and I spent, you know, the following 3 years there. But that shift for me was, you know, you don't go from a foundation that has, and I don't want to say unlimited resources, right? Because everyone's limited. But you don't go from a foundation that has so many resources and so much access and ability to do things to an organization that, you know, is kind of in this ambiguous, you know, stage of its journey, where you don't really know what's going to happen next. You don't go from one to the other like that unless you have some sort of passion for what you're doing. And for me, mentioned earlier, my parents worked in construction. My grandpa fixed refrigerators. My grandma, I don't think she'd ever consider herself an entrepreneur, but as a foster mother, essentially she worked for herself. I don't think I have ever not been around entrepreneurs and small business owners. I think that's always been the case for me. I've always been around people who are motivated in that way. And I knew that I was passionate enough about helping people, and I knew that I was knowledgeable enough to be able to do research that I could help and I could do. And I did. And I worked with so many people, and, you know, there's tangible results that came from that. And I think that if I could do it all over again, I would do it all over again because it's meaningful. And many of the business owners who I worked with back then have called me and said, I want to work with you still. And I'm like, no, I'm not there anymore. And they're like, that's okay. I still want to work with you. And I'm like, great. Let me know what we can do, because my interest in helping and my interest in being, you know, available and active with people never went away. That's still there. Right. That's still there. And I'm taking the opportunity now to say, what am I passionate about and what do I love and what do I enjoy? And right now, you know, I'll send you some B-roll for your video here, but now it's dancing salsa music, right? And for so many reasons, right? I jokingly will tell people, it's because I get to meet new people, but I've lost over 100 pounds. I've met some people.
All because of salsa, or
Mostly salsa and running from the weight. Yeah, for salsa and running. I sweat more salsa dancing in 2 1-hour classes than I do in my 10-mile run. So for whatever that's worth, that should tell you just how meaningful the cardio in that is. But I have really latched onto the genre as a music and a dance style because I've traveled all over the country now, and to another, to Mexico twice. I've met people from Peru, Venezuela, Colombia, Japan, you name it. I think I've met people from there so far, and that's that I've only been in this community for a little over a year and a half, right? And maybe you see the videos sometimes that I post of me dancing and stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, man, I just text Jeremy and he didn't text me back. He's over here dancing dancing in Mexico, dancing in
and that's the thing. Like, I am enjoying it, right?
Yeah.
I love it, and because I love it, and because I see other people who love it, I have said to myself, what can I do to make other people see this, right? Similar to you, you've experienced entrepreneurship in a way that's different, and now you've got the rec here, you've got the Entrepreneur Center here, and you're bringing that passion forward to somebody else. I've experienced health, mental health, friendship building, community building, all from a music genre that at one point was seen as a dirty, back alley, speakeasy, just
like during Prohibition or something.
Yeah,
or?
like
Okay.
yeah. I mean, and salsa, the style of salsa that I'm learning at the studios that I've gone to is salsa on two, which is, some people will sometimes say New York Rican. It was it was something that was developed in New York by a guy named Eddie Torres, who's still alive teaching salsa, right? But it was not something that was mainstream, right? And even now, if you think about it, as much as there is institutes and centers dedicated to ballet or to classical music, we don't have that for salsa music. We don't have, but 40 years ago, we didn't think mariachi or folklorico could be in a public school. And now there are public schools across the US that have both of those things. So why can't I see salsa in the public schools at some point? Why can't I see salsa institutionalized in a university at some point? We saw Willie Colon die the other day. People who aren't even into salsa music knew who Willie Colon was. He died. Where's the stories about him? Where are the oral histories about him? Who recorded him? And there may be some out there. But the hard thing is, we use AI for a lot of things at times. If I go into ChatGPT and say, are there any institutes or museums dedicated to salsa? You will find less than a handful. And if you go into the IRS tool, search system and look for salsa organizations, less than a handful.
Right.
And of those, many of them have fallen over, less than a 2 or 3 year period.
Yeah.
So can I do it? I think so. Will it take time? Definitely. But I am passionate enough about the what it has done for me that I think it can do for other people, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
No, that's awesome, and we'll jump into that a little bit more. But let's close off on what was the best thing you were the most proud of at your stay at Maestro?
I think the thing that I enjoyed the most was, I mentioned earlier, I have a background in history. I also went to a Catholic Marianist university. I went to St. Mary's University. The thing that I think nobody ever thought would really happen was us moving locations. We moved from, where we were founded on Laredo Street, which was an old school, to where the organization lives now, which is at Our Lady of the Lake University, at the old convent for the Sisters of Divine Providence. If you think about the history of the Sisters of Divine Providence and their creation of Project Quest, of the schools that they created, of their advocacy work at the Capitol, at the up in DC, um, all of Merced Housing. There are so many entities, Cops Metro. There's so many entities in town that have contributed to the welfare of San Antonio, to the well-being of our residents. And the Sisters of Divine Providence were somehow always involved.
Mhm.
And those sisters, similar to the brothers at St. Mary's, they are sin vergüenza. Like they're gonna do what they want to do,
Mhm.
and they're gonna do it with pride, and they're
Not
gonna
apologetic.
no, exactly, not apologetic. And to see the organization move into that space that fostered the creation of affordable housing, of job readiness, of all these organizations that came out of them, aside from the work the sisters did on their own in counseling and in education and things like that, it's meaningful, right? Like we didn't just move buildings, we moved our center of focus, right? That may live past me, that may not. I have no clue, right? That is up to new leadership, that is up to whoever's there now, that's up to the board. I, my only hope is that small businesses continue to receive support. That's it. But my proudest accomplishment was moving us to that space, and the other thing was getting us to a place where we were uh, functioning, we were operational, and there was not a fear of that being lost. And by the time I left, I mean, I could count uh, all the individuals who we had helped. I could tell you how many grants we had helped get awarded through technical assistance. I could tell you how many loans went out that we were part of that process for. And I could tell you about all the relationships we had built with all the funders and partners and community members. And that was the most important for me, was showing that nonprofits, right, once you create it, they're charities for public good. We were that. We were a space for public good, and I think that should always be the goal of nonprofits and organizations that are forward facing and people focused. And we were that. We did that. Um, I think physically that was my favorite, my the best accomplishment, and the other was just seeing business owners achieve what they wanted to achieve. Anytime someone came back and said, "Hey, we got our first loan, or we got our first big contract, or we got our first," there were so many firsts that were coming out of us. That is so meaningful. It's like a parent, I think. Like that's it. I'm gonna be like Jesus. I'm gonna have some kids because I
Some
want
kids.
some kids. Because just seeing the joy that you get out of somebody saying, "I succeeded at what nobody thought was possible." I want that for more people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember always getting your Facebook invites to the workshops, and I was just eating it up, man, like candy. I was so happy to see that organization. To be honest, for me, it was the first time I'd seen it on the map. I wasn't tracking them being around, and then I learned more about the story and the mission and the work that they had done and or were doing, and I remember going to the event. I think one of the last ones I had over there, but essentially, creating that environment where these business owners could talk, work together, and prosper all together. And it seems like, if I'm hearing you correctly, the thing you're the most proud of in your stay was not necessarily moving buildings, but moving to a space where those great things that happened at Our Lady of the Lake, and they can continue to happen in that prosperous environment. I mean,
Yeah.
Project Quest, I didn't realize the sisters had a big hand in that. Cops,
Merced Housing that came
Merced
out of
Housing.
the sisters. I mean, there's multiple, right? Like
right.
there's
I'm
multiple
sure it could go on,
organizations.
right?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, they too. We see the Catholic orders in general reducing, right? Like they're breaking down. The sisters, even though they are at this point where there's a very small amount and there's a very small amount joining, right? And they're not the only ones. All Catholic
Yeah,
orders.
priests, all of them, right?
They still stay active. They stay active. They stay involved. They stay doing what they need to do. They stay, kind and forward with the community. We need to keep showing that we can do stuff like that. It can't just be the sisters, right? And the same thing goes for this nonprofit that I'm helping build with the salsa community. Like, just like every
Rise.
community, Rise. Just like every community, there's its goods and there's the bads, right? But what I experienced out of it, I hope everyone who takes their first, their first 3 steps of their salsa basic can experience what I experienced through that. I never thought I would be dancing, multiple hours a week, and now that's what I find myself doing because of what it's given me and because of what I've seen it give other people. I want to see it continue to do that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's good to hear. I was real happy and proud of how you turned that organization around, and I think overall the sentiment was the same about almost everybody I've talked to. It was like, wow, yeah, he's doing a lot of those workshops, and very much so something we're looking to have here and creating those spaces. And I, through my journey in this process, have reached out for help and guidance and going through these motions, right? And a big question I get is why we're not a nonprofit opposed to being a business, right? And to me, having already started a nonprofit and being focused on our mission, to be honest, all I saw around was these BDOs going under, right? Like struggling to survive, hoping that the city was going to come through and this and that. And I'm talking over a 10-year period, right? I mean, it's like, I want this to be around. I want the rec to be around longer than 10 years. I want it to be around for as long as I'm alive, right? And what does that mean? It's like, it means we can't be dependent on city funding. And, if the city funding is going to dry out, then we have to be creative. And if we're going to be creative, then we can't stick to one mission of like, does that fall within our bylaws? Let's get our board to approve it and vote against it and then and this and that. It's like, no, we got to strike and we got to move fast. We got to be strategic. And as long as the vision is clear and able to be followed, I think we can execute. But a big reason, for us on our side is of us going business instead of nonprofit was because of that. I saw so many BDOs struggle, and it's always an annual thing. Beginning of the year, all right, people aren't giving money, and let's kind of wait. What's our budget going to look like for the rest of the year? That's why. And I'm like, well, if the stewardship, if the services that you're going to provide are what's defining it as a BDO or as a nonprofit, then let's just do them and do them for free. I mean, that's as simple for me. It's just do them and do them for free. And wherever you're going to make money, you make money that way and be creative. So I think a lot of our model has come from the experiences of seeing these other organizations through the ups and downs, and also from my own experience in the businesses here in the neighborhood. Because to be the only entrepreneur center here south of Highway 90, and knowing every single one of my neighbors directly adjacent to me has a business and operating out of their house, the entrepreneur spirit is alive and well here on the south side. And I think the community's thirsty for it. Is the money's going to come in for that? Probably not on the services side. Definitely not on the service side, because we're helping for free on the services side, right? It's the property, the renting out, the other things, the creative ways that we have to make money. And you know what? If we have a bad year, you know who will suck it up? It'd have to be me and Judith, right? And so I think with that longevity, I pray and I hope that this organization will be around longer than I'm alive. Big business will be around, organization interchangeably. But what do you think is the most challenging things BDOs face today?
Yeah, I'm gonna reflect back now on my time in the LEAD Fellowship. So I just technically graduated from the LEAD Fellowship, which
What is it?
Latino Executive Advancement Development Program through NALCAB. So NALCAB is the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. It's a long name, but essentially NALCAB is a we would call it what's the name of the? It's one of those organizations that works with other entities to help them build their resources, right? So, you can get loans from
Like
them
an
for
incubator?
nonprofits. Not an incubator. It's I don't want to reduce it to saying a pass-through organization, but it's an organization that resources can pass through, right? From it to other nonprofits.
I see, like an umbrella organization.
Like an umbrella organization, like Unidos US, like Rasa Development Fund. There's a whole bunch of other organizations that do similar work. But now CAB invited me to be a part of this National Leadership Fellowship, and in doing so, I met business development organizations from around the country. Organizations that are doing work similar to what my last organization was doing, similar to what you're doing. And in talking to all of them, the thing that faces those organizations with the most pressure is that many times, we see and we hear from nonprofits and for-profits and others that there needs to be a support for small businesses, right? There needs to be support. You talked a second ago about us, constantly being worried about what's next with city, state, local, regional funding. That's not any different around the country. Organizations that are supporting small businesses will get support here and there. They'll get, maybe we'll get one of those golden nuggets where, someone will say, we want to advocate and here's $1 million. How long does that last, right? How long does that actually come through and last you? It doesn't last forever. That's no different. The other is that there's a lot of people who out there, let's think about the misperceptions of public transportation. There's so many who say, those buses are empty. They're not empty. If they were empty, there would be zero need for them. But the reality is we have a need for public transportation. Well, if you think about it this way, business development organizations it's a form of public transportation for somebody who is starting a small business or for somebody who is working in a small business. It is not going to be the end all be all to help you grow your business. It should be one of those modes of transportation to get you from one point to the next. It should be there as a support system. It is not there to run the business for you. And so people tend to not know what business development organizations are doing. Both people who run businesses and those who do not will sit there saying, why are we funding another organization as a city or a county or a state that isn't doing anything? But the reality is, if I help, and this was never the case, but if I helped only one business that whole year, and that business went on to become a successful organization that had 10 employees, and those 10 employees had a collective of 26 family members, you think about the multiplier effect, and you think about how many families, how many people, individual people were impacted just from that one business owner succeeding. We could have pulled, in that case, 26 people out of poverty, right? Because a lot of times business owners who are successful, it's a mode out of some other situation. Rarely does a business owner start because they're rich, right? You're starting because you have a vision and a goal and a dream. If we can help you move forward in that, then we're approaching issues of poverty from a different angle. We're approaching issues of homelessness, issues of unstableness from another area, right? We're doing it in a different way, and we're doing it in a way that empowers people. The whole concept of, or the parable of, is it a parable of, I can, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That's what we're doing, right? Like, can we give you the tools so that you can then take those tools and build on them?
Right.
And if we can do that, then we've been successful. Now, that's just one business. If I then do it with 30 businesses in a year, 60 businesses, 100 businesses over 3 years, how many people did you impact? Because it's not just those 100 businesses. It's those 100 businesses, their employees, their families, and everyone who's been, positively impacted by your services as a business. That's thousands of people in a short amount of time. We have to see it that way. If you don't see it that way, then you're right. These spaces, including the Rendon Center, will fail. They'll fall because we don't understand what is being provided. Look at it that way. You are helping people remove themselves. They're not asking for handouts. They're asking for help. They're asking for someone with knowledge to share that knowledge with them. And that's the least we can do as an educated people, right? As a community. That's what you're doing. That's what I did. That's what we'll continue to do as individuals. And hopefully that's what you will continue to do here.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I think that's right on the dot, right? It's like, well, are they really doing those services, and how much of an impact is? And I think that's a common underlining problem in most nonprofits, period. How are you a data driven organization, and how do you make it quantable? How do you quantify the amount of money to the number of students serving, to the number of businesses started, and looking at it from that angle? You're absolutely right. I mean, pulling families out of poverty, raising the standard of living for that new tax bracket that they jumped into to help them get the basic necessities. Those are big deal game changers. And you said force multiplier, right? I think I've heard that a lot in these incubators, in these entrepreneur centers. Yeah, no, that was great explanation as to what the biggest problem you've seen these nonprofits face.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's shift gears into your new endeavors. And I know you kind of alluded to how you've jumped into those fields already, but let's talk about Lumos, right?
Lumos, mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Lumos. What type of clientele people are you looking to serve through Lumos?
Yeah, in being very direct about it, I want to work with businesses, nonprofits, governmental entities. I want to work with people who want to get things done, who want to work, right? You often see and hear about, cities and counties and governmental entities doing these, what are they called? Case studies, or I can't remember what they're called.
White papers.
Yeah. And then nothing happens afterwards, right? Sometimes stuff happens, but for the most part, there's a perception that nothing happens afterwards. I want to work with organizations who want to do that, but who want something to happen afterwards, right? Don't and I don't mean to say this in a crude way, but like, don't call if you're just wanting to ideate something. If you want to ideate, execute, and solve something together, let's work together, right? If you are a small business owner who wants to have a full overview of what it is that you're doing, let's look at your finances, at your assets, at your what you're paying your employees, which entities are you registered with as a vendor, what certifications do you have, what does your insurance look like, are you covered, like all of those things. I'm not an expert in. I'll start by saying that. All of those things, I'm an expert in connecting you with the people who you need to do those things. And I'll be able to see, hey, here's where the gaps lie, and here's who we need to talk to, and here's what you need to do next. My hope is to work with business owners and nonprofits who are ready to take that step, right? A lot of the times we see organizations and small businesses, as I saw before, that will make it to one threshold, let's say 250,000 a year or 500,000 a year. And then they stay there for years, right? And there's usually just something small or something, in some cases, something big that they need to adjust in order to make it to that next tier. And that's what I want to do, is help them see that. And the same thing for nonprofits. There's nonprofits who year after year receive the same dollars, but their costs go up. How do we match those dollars with the costs that are going up? Those are the people who I want to work with. And preferably with organizations who, have an ability and have a niche audience and market that we can say, hey, how do we capitalize on that, right? Are there 12 organizations that are just like you? Because if so, how do we differentiate you from those? How do we look at that together? And then on the governmental side, I've, in the years past, both from running for office and for working for other organizations, learned how to really have full conversations across divides, right? Whether that's a political divide, a wealth divide, people are people. And I think often it's hard for us to see that and hard for us to recognize that. But the reality is, if you approach with humanity and dignity a person who doesn't agree with someone on another side of some issue, they can have an honest conversation. Sometimes you need someone to facilitate that. And I want to work with governmental entities to facilitate that, to say, hey, I don't need to give you my resume of all the things I've done to do these things, but here's what we can do so that you can be successful at what you're trying to do right now, and so that the business owner or the the small business or the community member can benefit as a community member from what you are doing. And if you are ready to do that, then give me a call. Let's do that. And that's essentially what we're doing.
Okay. Where did you learn all these things to think about, I want to be a mediator of these two governmental entities? Is it growing up with your sisters and you had to separate the fights, or is it
No, I mentioned earlier you don't win there. So I could, it was it was I was sitting in a room once, and I won't tell you who. She'll know who it is when she sees this. But she came to me and said, Jeremy, I feel like it's interesting, and you should be happy that you can have a conversation with a group of activists on one side of City Hall, and you can have a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce on the other side of City Hall, and you can go to lunch with both of those people and have a meaningful conversation. And not everybody can do that. And I thought, that's silly. I don't think that's the case. And then over time, people would tell me, hey, you do realize it's interesting that you can have on your social media this person and this person in the same room, and you're fine with both of them, and they will have a conversation with both with you, but they won't have a conversation with each other. And I thought, huh, that's meaningful. If that can happen, and that's the case. And so I looked at it a little deeper, and I said, I think you're right. I can do that. And if I can do that for a good reason, and somebody who's trying to work on a project and they need community buy-in, or the community needs the government's buy-in on something, why can't I facilitate a conversation like that if I do it in a way that is dignified and respectful? And I believe that that's going to be the way that we solve a lot of issues that we face, is through real, honest, truthful conversation. It can't be fake. It has to be real. It has to be honest. And I'm ready to do that too. I'm ready to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where you primarily when you get clientele for that, you primarily operate out of their spaces, or you looking to become a member at the rec or something?
Yeah, I have primarily, met with people in their space, partially because part of that overview is to see their space, right? That's a big part of their operations, to understand what they're doing. But for me, it's meeting people where they feel the most comfortable, because they're going to dive into something that, in honesty, is probably a little, heavy, right? In many cases, if you're looking for help, for the most part, it's not because something's going amazing. It's because something's going wrong. I hope that's not always the case, but reality is, if everything's going well, there's less reason for you to feel like you need something. Now, I would push back on that and say, when everything's going well is when you should start to think about your growth and think about what could happen. When do you play devil's advocate, and when do you address liabilities? And that's where someone like me could come in and say, hey, here's where you have a gap, and here's where you could look at this. And the same thing goes for nonprofits, executive directors who, or CEOs who for years have just been doing things to keep the organization running, but haven't prioritized, what does the growth of this entity look like, or what does my growth in this entity look like? And we need to take care of our nonprofit CEOs. They're not taken care of. They really aren't. And my board for the past almost 3 years took care of me. They did. And people would check in on me. But board leadership also changes, and things change, and we don't put safeguards in place for board members. We don't put safeguards in place for executive directors and CEOs. And when you do, it's usually because the organization is big enough to do that. But San Antonio has a very dense population of nonprofits, very dense community of nonprofits. And for the most part, their leadership is not protected, right? And if you think about it this way, if the leadership isn't protected, neither is the community it's serving, because you could lose that benefit to the community at any time.
What do you mean protected?
I mean, there's this concept, I don't know that it applies much to the federal government anymore, but that there's always guardrails that are put into play in
Like a checks and balances type of.
a sort of checks and balances, but guardrails that are put in place to keep things from going the wrong way, right?
It sounds like the bylaws, right?
Sounds like bylaws, and in many cases, right,
Bylaws
some
are
of it
out
is
of
even
date.
unspoken, right? And bylaws are out of date. So if there are things put in place that help you see where the flaws live, where the liabilities are, then you can address them, you can pull them, and you can adjust them. If nobody takes the time to look into those things, then truly there's no succession plan. If somebody leaves and everything falls apart,
What do we do?
what do you do, right? And you see nonprofits fall for that. How do we stop that from happening, right? It is at the board's interest, and it is at the executive director, CEO's interest, and it's in the staff's interest to create a plan of succession that will keep an organization living. And right now, many organizations don't have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're not safe as a community. If the organization, if a nonprofit by nature is a community-based entity, then the community is not safe when the executive director, the leader, the staff is not safe. We need to put better guardrails in place. Yeah.
Okay. So with the work you're doing with Lumos and then Rise is another organization. Are you consulting Rise, or are you the executive director of Rise? I know you introduced yourself as executive director, but how did that relationship start?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I've been salsa dancing, right, for a little over a year, and
More than that, no?
Huh?
Only a year?
It's been
No way.
It's been.
Do you post that many videos? I'm like, I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yes,
Jesus.
yes. So that's On top of that, I joke with a friend of mine who's a DJ that I've become a salsa Shazam because I'll hear a few beats of something, or and
Your
he'll
leg
try to
starts
throw
twitching?
me off. Huh?
Your leg starts twitching?
Yeah, but also I can tell you quickly, like, oh wait, I know what song this is, even if it's another artist, whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll go into a can of worms if I do that. But it's been about a year and a half, and I've met so many instructors in San Antonio alone. We have 3 major dance studios. No, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 major dance studios. We have the first one that existed here, to my knowledge, Seminea, which most people have heard about Seminea at some point in time or the other. We have, I think, what would have been, and I'm still kind of new, so somebody's going to yell at me and say that I was wrong about dates and times and stuff, but I think next would have probably been Salsa Entrepreneur School, and then Esta Noche Dance Studios, and then Flamboyant Dance Studios, which is where I currently am, we say training, but I started at Salsa Entrepreneur and then I moved to Flamboyant. But all of the owners of these studios have a passion for salsa, right? They're business owners, so definitely they're they need to be able to pay themselves and to live, but they love the dance style. They love the genre. They love the dance style. And I started meeting people in the community, in the scene of dancers, and over time I would share with people, I've worked in nonprofits and I do fundraising and I do other things, and this group of folks were most closely tied to Seminea, that first studio. So Lee Rios, who is the founder of Seminea and for many years has taught salsa in this community, also happened to be somebody who over the years has brought people into our community, into the United States from other places, other countries, and trained with them and had them train people here. And so there are international dancers, studios, people who he has impacted over the years. And, as I was talking to them while I was still working at my last job, like in my own free time, I would talk to them about their want to start a nonprofit. And I was guiding and saying, hey, here's some things you could do. They said, well, can you help? And I thought, well, I don't really have capacity to help, right? I've got this full time, and that's my focus at the nonprofit I was at the time. And when I announced that I was leaving the other nonprofit, they said, hey, would you do this, full time with us? Help us get this off the ground. And I looked at it and I started doing my research and found that there were no entities like this that existed. And usually that's the case in a city, there's none like that in the US, right? Like it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
There's a couple of congresses, which are like festivals that exist that have been long lasting and have raised a significant amount of money. But primarily their focus is that one festival, that one congress. Here, while we have a focus on what is called the BIG Salsa Fest, which comes in July, that one festival is what I would refer to as the flagship. It's really the hope is to lift that festival up. But my hope and what I asked them when I started working with them was, can we expand that? Can we teach, can we go in and impact the health of senior citizens? Can we work with students and kids? And not to create another studio. We don't need another studio, right? But to create a space that is open to people. And not in the way that a studio is or isn't, but to create a space that is public facing, that is not with the intent of making any revenue or money like that, but with the intent of sharing with others the same health benefits I got, the same mental health benefits I got, the same friendships, building that community out. How do I help do that for people who don't have the ability to go to a salsa studio, who don't have the ability to pay for a membership somewhere? Because it's not cheap. It's like a gym membership.
Is it?
It's like a boutique gym membership. I think all of the studios at the least is $100 a month to join.
Boutique is like a homemade, or what is boutique?
I'm sorry, boutique, like I was referring to boutique like a boutique gym, so like an Orange Theory or an F45.
Oh,
or
like a
CrossFit.
high tier, like fancy pants.
Because, it's not big enough to be inexpensive enough.
You're right. The volume isn't there.
Exactly. So at the
they're
lowest, to get a full membership, you're paying at least $100 a month. At the highest, I think the highest membership in town is close to $200 a month.
Wow.
So you're paying a good chunk of money.
Quick plug. For $99 a month here at the Rec. And if you're from the South Side, 25% off. Go ahead.
Yeah, but how do I share that with people who can't experience it? Because I could not always afford that, right? Like I was not always in that place. And there's students that get interested in this, and there's, people of all age ranges, of all backgrounds. They're not just Latinos dancing salsa, I will tell you that. One of my favorite dancers is from Japan, and she's Japanese. And I danced with her in Hawaii, and she's amazing. But it is something for everyone. Salsa is something for everyone. Bachata is something for everyone. No, you don't have to be doing body rolls and all that other stuff.
So when you say salsa, there's not an organization. Is it specifically for that style of dancing, or does that include bachata? Does that include all the other?
Yeah. So the of course at the spotlight at the center, and this is my bias, is salsa, right? Okay. Because I think that is, to me at least, is the heavier influenced music genre and dance. But when I started helping them navigate the description and the storytelling around the organization, it was really the genres and dance that come from the Afro-Caribbean diaspora. That would include bachata, kizomba, zouk, salsa, son, Cuban, rueda, all the dance styles that come from the very basic footsteps of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, it's so simple, yet it's so complicated, like the history of it, right? Where did it come from? And there's histories that vary.
So it doesn't include cumbias.
Cumbia comes in there too.
It includes cumbia.
Cumbia comes in there too. We just had a cumbia class the other day at one of the studios. But yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a lot more to it. Right. And truly, I think at some point, once we see that emphasis on these music styles, it will just be one institute for salsa at some point, one institute for bachata, because why should we limit ourselves to understanding genres of that diaspora to be just Latin music? Like, we don't consider country, classical rock, and rock and roll, soft rock to just be American music. No, we call them each.
Used to be blues, right? Just blues, right?
Jazz. We don't, but we separate them out and we give them each an institution. Yet for our music that is of that diaspora,
still grouped
together, right?
To be honest, I don't know hardly. I probably know 3 of those words: salsa, bachata, right? Cumbias. The other ones, and couldn't tell you the difference because of
and
lack
a year
of
and a half
education.
ago, I couldn't either. right? And that's part of my interest is how do I share that with people,
Yeah.
right? Because you may find it interesting, and you may go back and Google search what is kizomba, what is zouk, what is. I mean, I've heard of tango, but I've never danced tango before in my life. But most people know what tango is, right?
I've heard of mango.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so let me kind of regurgitate back to you how I'm understanding this organization to be. So Rise is somewhere between an advocacy for education on the history of each of these different styles of Latin dance, and because there's not a national one. It's not necessarily a studio, but y'all will do studio stuff.
The hope is to do public programming. So
okay, public programming.
Yeah, ideally, I mentioned that there's 4 major studios. Ideally, all 4 of those major studios will be involved, right? Because truly, if you think about it from the small business case, if we introduce salsa to more people in the community, then they will eventually all end up as leads for these small businesses, right? Because then someone's going to say, "Great, now I've taken your the free class you offered out in downtown San Antonio. Now what if I want to learn more? Well, here's 4 studios. Go learn more. Pick where you find your emphasis. I take classes at Framboyan because I have a community that I've started to build there, but each studio has its emphasis, right? Jokingly and not jokingly, we say esta noche. If you really want to learn bachata well, go to esta noche, right? Mambo, this other style of salsa on 2 that's kind of embedded, go to salsa on 2 school. If you're wanting to train, from an instructor who spent a lot of time in Mexico and New York and has, this emphasis on Afro and body movement, go to Framboyan. Semenea, he's still, the teacher that teaches the most salsa on 1, which is more of a global style of salsa. Every studio has its niche, the same way every business owner has their niche. So hopefully we can introduce San Antonio, as a population to these studios and to the styles of music in a way that they can experience it the way I have.
Do you think that the growth of all these different dance forms is directly proportional to the new music coming out in each of those fields?
Yes and no. Because I started dancing a year and a half ago when the new music like that would, what people would think of now, Raúl Alejandro and Bad Bunny and, even Bruno Mars now with the cha-cha song and the salsa song. That wasn't coming out at that point, right? And there was new salsa coming out, but it was, what we would consider coming from salsa artists. So at that time, I saw that there was a lot of people involved. I definitely will say that I knew, hearing from studio owners and instructors, that when Bad Bunny came up with his album, there definitely was an influx in people coming to studios. But I think it can be tied. It can be, and it might be in some places, and in some places not so much. It is just a fun thing when you start it, right? And if you go to a salsa social, which is not, I think, as commonly known to people who are not involved in that scene, but it's essentially a night where you come out and dance, to all these these genres. If you go to one of those socials and you just sit there and watch, you'll probably sit there with your mouth open, just looking at everybody dance, because they've all been,
the levels
so different, right? And that's not to say that there's only one way of dancing that is right. It's to say that it is something that when you see it, you're kind of like, wow, what is this? Like, why are these people dance like this? And that happened to me. So, I can see that happening to others. Yeah.
I asked that question because I think about the growth of rock music, right? And it's not necessarily so outward expressive the way these other dance musics have been. And I feel like that's where Main Street America has gone to. The songs that you can physically express yourself in, the rise of music videos, the rise of all that. I mean, rock took on, and it was like, oh, that's a deep movie, right? That's a deep music video. I love that song. And look at those lyrics. Like, that was really what country music, rock, and those genres have represented. and then you go to salsa and you go to like all these rap stuff now, right? It's like, okay, yeah, the words are still in like hardcore rap, but then you go to pop and it's like, it's how it makes you feel and how you physically dance. And then you see all like Soldier Boy came out, everybody want to learn to dance, right? We're in high school and I'm like, right, just all that whole genre of expressing yourself through the music. But if the pop mainstream engine is not behind it, how sustainable do you think that is? Because we're, you talk about there hasn't, the fact that there's not a national organization to represent this, is it because there hasn't been new big music like that? You talk about these new songs. When I think of salsa, I don't think of Bad Bunny, right? I think of Suavemente, right? I think of all that.
Which is funny because I think Suavemente is like merengue.
Yeah, sorry, whatever. Yeah.
But that is
correct me, right?
No, but you're right. Half the time I'll be like, "What's your favorite salsa song?" And I get Suavemente. And I'm like,
yeah.
No, but truly, a year and a half
Exactly
ago,
that.
I would have said Suavemente.
Right.
So man, I'm gonna get beat up for saying that.
Here we go.
But yeah.
Well, the point I'm making is the same way I still listen to the same old rock songs because like I still love those lyrics and it's still deep. You have those fans of these salsa dancers, this merengue, all those dancers who are loyal to the trait because of those core principles. You don't see those new songs the way, and the movements were behind them in those days, right? You talked about the prohibition, the history. What are we living today that's going to be history of tomorrow, of how we preserve that? And I mean, I couldn't think of a better example than what you're creating here.
Yeah, and let's take it back a little bit. And this is where I love the history part. You've maybe heard of Mercedes Sosa or Joan Baez or there's so many artists that back, I don't know how many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, there was this movement called Nueva Canción, right? And so you heard artists like Joan Baez and Mercedes Sosa and Violeta Parra and others from Argentina and Chile and other places that were using music as a form of political activism, right? They were talking about what's happening in the streets in their countries. They were talking about, where poverty lived. They were talking about Cuba. In the past few years, we had Gente de Zona and I think I said several groups that got together and made the song Patria y Vida, which is a song about what is happening in Cuba, right? This is not new, right? It's Bad Bunny put the spotlight on this, and you see his tiny desk, and he's using the flag of Puerto Rican independence, right? The flag that has a different color to it, right? He's using his platform in a way that is not even explicitly showing his political views, but then he is, right? And he's using it that way. And I'm not telling people, hey, come dance salsa so that you can, raise your fist. If you want to do that, good for you. Like, let's, you do what you think it makes sense for you. What I'm saying is, let me share this salsa, this genre, this dance, this experience with you so that you can experience what I experienced, so that you can meet people, so that you can, understand people better, so you can live a different way and really, really understand what it is that we're doing. And hopefully you get inspired to do something from that, right? And I think people will. I think people will. And I think I'm going to tell Judith to get you to come take a salsa class. Well, and maybe she'll get you there.
Yeah, we that's a whole nother podcast right there. But
Esmeralda says she's going to come take a salsa class.
See, I'm sure she dances a lot better than I do. I think I'm excited to hear about it, and the facts that you brought to the table that are just shocking, right? Like there's not an organization like that. It is. Those are the gold nuggets in opportunity that you see. Like, oh wow, something so simple you would think, but there's not.
You would just assume off the right. It must exist, and if not here, maybe in Latin America.
Right.
Nope.
Not even there.
It's not there. Like, and if it is through all the research that I've done and I just happen to not find it, that's I get that. But let's if that's the case, it doesn't exist here in the US at least, and if it does, it's not it doesn't span far enough for
Mhm.
people to know that it exists and that it's doing something. We need to do oral histories. We need
Mhm.
to help understand the genre and the dance better. And it's not just about the music. It's about preserving something that is bigger than
Right.
us, right? Yeah.
Is this so? This is going to be your full time in addition with the side Lumen. What does your next 12 months look like for you with this organization? What are your goals?
Yeah, so the first major festival, which I start most of my posts and things telling people this is not new. The nonprofit established is new, but the festival that is the flagship has been around for 20 years, right?
Mhm.
So that's not new. The festival will still happen in July. The hope is to raise some funds to boost that festival in a way that it can actually be seen on a bigger scale. So that'll happen within the next 6 months, or even I think 4 months. Um, 12 months in, the hope is to establish enough funds to be an operating full-time organization with 1 to 3 staff members, full time. And then the hope in 3 to 5 years would be to see it attach itself to a university, a college, and actually build out an institute the way that Mariachi or Folklorico or others have to universities.
Mm.
um that's the hope, right? Because then, similar to you, how you're like, I want the rec to last past me,
Mhm.
I want Rise to last past me, right? I want it to last past me. I want it to go past San Antonio. I want it to go past the US. I want people to say, I want to go to San Antonio for Rise. And you would think, why San Antonio? In my zip code alone, we had Southwest voter registration, Guadalupe Cultural Arts, the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center. We had MOC, we had Macri, I mean, all the entities and organizations that came out of the zip code that I live in
Mhm.
were assets being built for our community, right? Not just the West Side, but for Latinos, for movers.
Mhm.
I want to do the same thing again, right? I'm in a space that has proven the ability to grow in that way.
Mhm.
Let's grow another organization in that way. People care.
Right. What is your purpose in life?
Dang, we went philosophical. I looked at Esmeralda, but I
It's
don't think she's gonna tell.
she knows it's getting deep here pretty soon.
What is my purpose? I would say that my purpose is to be a connector. I think I've always kind of been a connector. Um, I at times will have a bit of a spotlight on me here and there, and while that can be fun, my you know on a broader scale, I have enjoyed when I'm able to say I connected that person with that person, and now look where they're at,
Mhm.
and now look what they've done together. I hope to continue to connect people over time.
Mhm.
In every role that I've had, I've connected people. In every civic engagement that I've been a part of, I've connected people. And I didn't even know I was doing it until someone pointed it out and was like, "You're a connector. Do you realize that?" And I was like, "No, I definitely don't think that's the case." And then it would get repeated.
Mhm.
I think that's my purpose, is to be a connector.
Okay. Do you believe in God?
I do.
Why?
Why? Hmm. Um, I don't know that I could tell you why. That's an interesting question. So when I was at St. Mary's, I took a class called Religious Transformation. And often people will tell me, is it interesting going to a Catholic university? Do you have to learn about, Catholicism and stuff? And I said, you don't have to learn about Catholicism. You don't even have to take religion classes. You do have to take classes that will give you a broader understanding of the world. And one of those classes I took was called Religious Transformation. And we spent a lot of time talking about doubt, and doubt in God, and doubt in faith, and doubt in religion. And the thing that I learned there, we talked a lot about Mother Teresa, who is now Saint Mother
Mhm.
Teresa,
And her letters,
and
who since have come out.
and her letters that have come out describing just how much doubt she had that a God existed.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, and it's one of those mind turning things that people start to fight you on it, because there's like, no, no, no. They get very nervous about it. You cannot have faith or belief in any sort of higher power, whatever your spirituality leads you to, unless you have a doubt. Unless you doubt, it doesn't exist. At some point in time or another, you will doubt. And I think that if I were to answer your question, it is because I have doubted that I believe. And many of the doctrines of faith, so Mother Teresa is considered a doctor of the faith, doctrine of the faith, doubted. They are some of the biggest doubters of faith. And I am not a doctor of the faith. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is I have recognized that in order for you to believe in something, you have to understand that there's a possibility that something doesn't exist. And it will throw people off so bad that they're like, don't tell me that.
No, that's, I mean, it's same with, light, right? Darkness is the absence of light, and faith. Can faith exist without any doubt? No, I mean, it's because of the doubt existing in the world that faith exists, right?
Yeah. So some people will come here and tell you it's because of this miracle, and I enjoyed this, and life is amazing, and God is beautiful, and all these things. My response to you is, I have doubted, and because I have doubted, I believe.
No need to say more.
Yeah.
How do you know if something is divine?
How do I know if something is divine? I'm not meant to know if something is divine. So I don't.
Do you think God talks to you, leads you in one way or the other? If it's what God wants you to do.
I think that I have tried my best to follow the moral compass that guides me, and that may be God that does that. It may be me through the free will that I've been given. So does that happen? Yes. Do I know when that happens specifically through God? No.
What do you do when you have to make a hard decision?
I remove myself from the decision. I take a step back. I used to react, and I would overreact. And it always led to not great outcomes. And I have tried so hard over the years, and I'm not perfect. I fail at times, but I have tried so hard over the years to not react or overreact. I've tried so hard to pull back and just try my best to understand situations a little better. And I still react and overreact at times. I am a flawed human. Yeah.
So that's a great first step, especially when dealing with conflict. And it's no wonder, you talk about mediating between government entities. To take yourself out of the equation is probably the best thing to do, right? And you take the humility out. You add the humility aspect, but take out the pride aspect. What about when the decisions are directly impacting you, and you can't take yourself out of it? It's a decision you need to make and lead on.
I would say I take a similar approach. It's not that I take myself out, but I try to think about it from a third-party view, right? If you can be a third-party surrogate in your own life, then you can start to understand where other people's perspectives may have grown from. People may see that I salsa dance multiple times a week and may think, wow, he does nothing, right? You could look at it that way. Or you could, without knowing my history or knowing what salsa has done for me, you could still say, wow, Geremy's doing something that I'm sure is doing something for him, right? Geremy's doing something that I'm sure is affecting his life in some way. I may not know how, but he is. The same thing applies to just about everything else. If you can pull yourself and just try to think about it from the perspective of a stranger. When I say third-party surrogate, I'm talking a stranger, someone who does not even know.
There's no bias.
You at all. If you can look at it that way and just look factually at what is in front of you, then you can make a sound decision, I think. And that's meaningful. Yeah.
Okay. What happens after you die?
What happens after you die? I haven't died yet. I don't know. I don't know.
Whose death greatly affected you?
I think that in many ways, I don't think that my life has been heavily impacted by death.
Mm.
That's not to say important people in my life haven't died. They
Right.
have, but I think that in many ways, I tried to see it for what it was, which was a passing, right? But tried not to see it for what it could have been based on my perspective, which is something negative or something sad or something whatever. Like we're always sad when we lose people, but I don't think that any specific death has taken a toll on me. I think the way that the question might be intended to understand, to my knowledge at least. Yeah.
Okay. If today was your day and you were to die today and you only had one phone call, who would you call?
Who would I call? I'm gonna cause an argument. I'd probably call my grandma. I'm the closest to her, and everybody around us and everyone that knows us knows that she's the person I'm closest to. Probably her.
What would you say?
I probably wouldn't say much. I'd probably let her talk. My enjoyment in talking with her is hearing her stories and letting her, share what she wants to share. She's always been very amusing to me. She's a character.
Okay. So you'd tell her, "Hey, Grandma, I'm out of here," and you'd wait for whatever she had to fill in the blank with, and you know that was enough.
Chances are she'd make me laugh. So I can't think of anything greater than to laugh with the person who you care about. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a parable or a Bible verse or a story in the Bible that resonates with you? That you talked about teach a man to fish, and
yeah, I said that because my grandpa used to say it often. I don't think I realized until later that it was a parable or it was a story from the Bible. I think that I've always found. I'm going to give you a different type of answer. We've talked a lot about perspective today, and I've brought the word perspective into this conversation often. Have you ever heard of gospel parallels? So, in short, if you look at all four gospels and you put them next to each other, you can find, and there's this concept in theology of gospel parallels, you can find where there are four stories that are the same story told from four different perspectives from each one of those four gospel I'll say authors. And each one's perspective of each situation is completely different. They call the mountain a different thing. They call the person who died something different. But there's tons of research over gospel parallels. And what I did not, the most interesting thing I've ever learned in any sort of theological learnings and any sort of religious learnings is that we tend to, have you ever heard the term dispensationalist? There's essentially folks who believe that the Bible is word for word, that those things happened like exactly how they were told there. But if you truly think about it, very literal. But if you truly think about it, they're recollections. They're recollections of stories.
Right. They were written. A lot of them were written after.
Yeah. And then they were translated. Who knows how many times? So if you think about what it is teaching you for the most part, and you understand that each gospel is told from a different perspective, then it should give you the leaning to understand that perspectives matter a lot. And that's just four perspectives, and look at how much those four perspectives have impacted the world, right? Religion has been used in the name of wars, has been used in love, has been used in all of these things based on these four gospels, which not one of the four people agreed on the story with each other. So what does that tell you about perspectives? I think the Bible teaches you a lot about perspective. I think it teaches you a lot about perspective. I think, if anything, the thing that has always stuck to me, and I think it's somewhere in Luke, is, in the Catholic Church, at some point you say that phrase, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof. I just thought that had something to do with, receiving communion. It's literally somebody who says in the Bible at some point, like, I'm not worthy that you should be here in my house. Like, I haven't done enough for you. That always just kind of stuck to me because
but
often,
only say the word, my soul shall be healed.
yeah. So I realized at some point it was a metaphor, right? Of course, then I was reading at the time and learning in theology classes. I never realized, people talk about, and this is not in any way a criticism, but people always talk about, why are Catholics always kneeling and then standing and then, praying, and then they all have these phrases and things. They're all tied to some story in the Bible. Every single motion you take during a mass, the mass parts, is tied to some biblical verse, phrase, dogma, if you want to call it that. I might get in trouble for saying that, but it's tied to something. It wasn't some dude who came up with it. It was some Bible verse that was pulled, and we said, how do we reflect that? So even though you may not know it, every Sunday when you go to mass, because I can tell you that if you walk into a church and ask people where that came from, they can't tell you where it's from half the time. You are repeating Bible verses throughout the mass without knowing it. Without knowing it, you're repeating it. And not only you're repeating it, there's several other billion people around the world saying that same exact Bible verse. That's powerful, I think, to me. And it reminds me that when I am sitting there in a mass and I have to kneel, or I have to stand, or I have to sit, or I have to genuflect, or I have to whatever, that there's a reason for it. There was a reason for it, and it is a reference to something biblical. That changed my perspective on it, because at some point I did agree. I was like, yeah, why do we kneel and stand, and why is there smoke and all these things? There's a reason for it. And without stuffing it down your throat, the reasons exist. Yeah.
It's almost like it's intrinsic in the procession of the mass. And perspective. And a lot of times perspective is reality for people, especially when you're trying to work with someone. But how do you outlive that lifetime? How do you outlive generations? I think it's got to be practiced. It's got to be built in through the actions, whether it's interpreted 100% correctly or not. I think through the practices, it is because it is, and it's no reason why it's lived the test of time, even through the ugly times where armies were gathered in the name of the Lord, right? I mean, obviously they weren't following Jesus's teachings, right? And it was manipulated the same way you see the Christian nationalists now weaponizing different verses of the Bible for their agenda on one side and the other side, right? I think that's the human factor in it, but I think you were right, point on in describing the movements and processions that are intrinsically built into the mass so that they're preserved. And perspective, it's crazy because perspective matters now, but is it preserved? You think about a memory that happened 20 years ago. People normally remember how they felt first. They don't remember what led up to the details of XYZ, and from the perspective that it was told from of someone else. They only remember theirs.
Yeah.
And so you think about, okay, how do we preserve that memory to the best accurate? I mean, it'd have to be through reenactions and built-in intrinsic things. I mean, I think action is louder than words, right? But interesting response to your favorite parable story. But
I promise you'll never get that response in these conversations.
Well, I think perspective is huge always, and it helps you certainly in instances when you have dialogue with powerful people. Perspective is important.
I'll tell you this: you are going to go down the rabbit hole of gospel parallels now. and you'll go in there and be like, whoa, I did not realize that was the same story, or I did not realize that was the same recollection.
Well, I think you have different writers at different times, and I think there may be nuances where they're off, but I mean it's like the accounts with the resurrection, right? I mean, you know what happened, or it accounts with the crucifixion, you know what happened through different, but and they're all different stories. The Bible was built with different stories and different letters that came together. So, no, it's good dialogue, good conversation. What is the best advice anybody's ever given you? I know you briefly talked about it right when we started, but of all times, best advice anybody's ever given you?
Of all time, the best advice anyone's ever given me. I mean, that sounds so cliche, but it's a practice that I think people need to learn a little more of. And my advisor in college, my undergrad degree was exercise and sports science, focusing on wellness. And you would be so surprised how simple it is. And it seems silly because you're like, no, I'm doing it all the time. To just breathe. Like, if you just breathe, working out, conversations, struggles, pressures, love, every single thing you do, if you were to just breathe a little bit more, so simple, it will change so much for you. Just breathe. It does so much for you. I know that sounds cliche. I know that sounds oversimplified, but too often, especially in the anxiousness of the world that we live in now, people forget to breathe. If you were to just breathe, you would treat your partner a little better, your kids a little better, your finances a little different, your work a little different. Just take a deep breath. We get up in the morning and we start immediately. You pick up your phone and you start looking at what you missed right away. Yet, we don't need that to live. We need water, we need air,
right?
But we tend to not breathe. I think just breathe.
So you mean it metaphorically and literally?
Both.
Yeah. So it's like, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. But also, you don't get no oxygen, nutrients to your brain. You don't function as well.
No, you
well
need
said. Especially in the most tense of moments. I grew up boxing and fighting and grappling. If your breathing control is off, you're beating yourself.
Yeah. I mean, they teach you in every form of movement practice that you can think of, yoga, dancing, singing. If you breathe at the wrong points in time, it's not going to work. It's just not. I think that we forget to do some of the very simple things. And our bodies let us breathe by itself. But if you're intentional about your breathing, which is a very big concept in yoga, in the practice of yoga, you can do so much more because you stop limiting yourself. Yeah.
Okay. This next portion, last part here, is a little bit more rapid fire, kind of hard questions. You got to pull off the cuff. You got to pick one. Favorite band of all time?
Favorite band of all time? Man, that is not an easy question for someone that listens to so much music. I can't answer that. I don't know.
What are you listening to right now?
Actually, you know what? I listen the most to Karin Leon.
Karin Leon. Okay. Favorite song of all time?
Favorite song of
Even
all
harder.
time. Even harder question. Maybe Más Allá. It's a mariachi song.
Sings it.
This version, the version I like, is Mariachi Sol de Mexico, but it's a song called Más Allá.
Okay. Favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie? This is going to be so funny. I'm going to get roasted. Honestly, I think my favorite movie is Sister Act. The one with Whoopi.
Whoopi Goldberg? Really?
Yeah.
What's the other girl's name? Was in that? Yeah. I know you're
I just think it's a funny movie.
Like
I just think it's a funny movie. And it's one of those. You know how I know it's my favorite movie is because it's one of those movies I'll put on in the background just to have noise on.
That's how I know the movie, like always in the background. Like,
Yeah, because I don't get tired of hearing it.
mhm.
Yeah, I like the Harry Potter movies. I don't dislike those, but I don't put them on in the background as often. I like The Greatest Game Ever Played, which is that one with Shia LaBeouf, like a Disney movie from I don't know when. There's certain movies that I've just enjoyed over
Genres.
time. Yeah, but yeah.
Song that always
Sorry.
makes you cry.
Song that makes me cry. It doesn't make me cry, but it makes me think about my grandma crying, and it's a bachata song called Burbujas de Amor by Juan Luis Guerra. She said my grandpa sang it to her off and on over the years, and then also before she had a major brain surgery
Your grandma?
back in the year that I was born, 95. And she said he sang that song to her before she went to brain surgery, and she was like, "What if that's the last time I heard that song?"
Wow.
Yeah. So when I hear it, it makes me think of her.
Mexican songs hit different when you sing them to your spouse. Yeah, it's like
I wouldn't know. I'm not married. I'm single.
Well, Judith would.
I'll find out someday.
Judith would know. She's like, man, that hit different. It hurt my ear. It's
Yeah.
like, ah. But yeah, all right. Favorite actor of all time?
Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates? Really?
Yeah. I like any movie with Kathy Bates in it.
Yeah, Waterboy.
What's funny is I think I've only seen that once. I think I've only seen it once. But
She's the devil.
yeah, that's funny.
That's
Yeah,
good.
she's such a good actress. She is honestly such
She's
a
on
good
everything.
actress.
Oh man, I can quote Waterboy all day. Favorite book?
Favorite book. Favorite book would be What Happened to You.
By
It's
who?
written by Oprah and Dr. Bruce something. But it's called What Happened to You. She shifts the way that you ask questions about people's trauma into trying to understand better, not why did this happen to you, but what happened to you. And actually, my second favorite book is one of the ones that she has on her book club, which is by what is his name? I can't remember what his name is. But it's a book written by a father to his son. Let me see, because I think it's really important that people
Follow it. Well, next one's gonna be your reading list recommended.
Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And it's him reading to his son, like, between me and you, this is what it's like in this world. And it is so powerful. And if you listen to the audiobook, it's even more powerful because he's reading
His
it like
voice.
he's reading it to his
Yeah,
son.
that's the best.
Yeah. What'd you say the next question
Reading
was?
list. So you hit your number 2. Any other recommendations? Gotta reads.
In San Antonio, I think everyone needs to read Greedy Bastards by Cheryl Scully.
Oh, she wrote. I didn't realize
She wrote Greedy Bastards about her time on working as the city manager and her time working on the contracts between the police, fire, and like on the collective bargaining. But she gave so much insight into San Antonio and into what it's like running cities. And I think that if people understood that a little better, I think they'd understand how things happen in their world. I also
How long ago was that book written?
I think probably 2018.
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken. And intentionally I use Goodreads. Do you ever use Goodreads?
So she was
Goodreads
still city manager when she wrote it then.
Oh no! So then it was after that because I know that it was. I know that she wrote it afterwards. Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. That's a really good one.
Yeah, Jay Shetty, he's good.
Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond is a good one. You've probably read Make Your Bed, the Admiral McCraven.
Admiral McCraven.
So
of course we have.
Have you seen?
He was our graduation commencement speaker.
You were at that?
That's okay. First of all, I wasn't there,
Oh.
but that was our class. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. So I met him.
You did?
And I email him back and forth.
Get out of here. Y'all are
Yeah,
buds?
there's a LinkedIn post that I wrote that went viral about the first time I met him. And people were like, "You don't realize who you just met?" And I was like, "No, who did I meet?" And then they told me who it was.
When did you meet him?
I met him when I was first interested in applying for a PhD program at UT Austin.
So recently.
This was a few years ago.
Oh.
I wanted to do that years ago, and I just kind of stopped myself. But I met him, and I wrote the post, and it started getting shared like crazy, and it's at 5,300 likes, and I don't know how many shares. And
Hey,
whatever.
you are viral, man. Look at that.
Yeah, but long story short, I walk onto the campus
3 years ago.
and and I tell this story like this. There's this tall, unassuming white man with a polo shirt. And I jokingly said something like, he looked like everyone else in Austin. I'm probably going to get roasted for that. But I was like, there's this tall white dude with a briefcase and a polo shirt with a UT logo, like the Longhorn. And he's standing there, and we start talking, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I just wanted to see if I can meet some professors, but apparently on a Friday afternoon, there's not many professors around UT." And this is right after COVID, I think. So I wrote this 3 years ago. And he starts talking to me about, why I'm interested in public policy, because he teaches in the public policy school, in the LBJ school. And I start telling him that, I ran for city council. And at some point, I think I mentioned Henry Cisneros. He then says, "Oh, my dad worked for Henry Cisneros during the League of Cities time, and or Model Cities." And I started discussing zoning with him and some housing policies and stuff. And he was like, "Wait, you actually know what I'm talking about with Model Cities?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so then at some point, he tells me, "I think I can tell, Geremy, you belong here. Like, you belong at UT, and you
Pues, ¿qué
belong."
espera?
And I know, right? And he's like, "You belong in this program." And I told him, "You don't even know me yet." And he very quickly was like, "That's okay. I can tell that you belong here." And then I ended the conversation and asked him, "What is your name?" And I, reached out and shook his hand, and he said, "My name's Bill McCraven." And I was like, "All right, cool." So I went home and I just looked up Bill McCraven, and it kept popping up, retired Navy Admiral. And I was like,
He's big time.
"Is this the same guy?" And I kept looking at it, and then I would start getting everything about Osama bin Laden and the raid that he was, essentially leading, and his time working for Obama. And then he was the chancellor of the UT system at some point. And I was like, "Is this the same tall white dude that I met?" And sure enough, it was the same tall white dude that I met. And so I downloaded this picture, and I posted it, and I put the story. And then people were like, you met the Made Your Bed guy." And I was like,
Yeah, Made Your Bed.
"What do you mean the Make Your Bed guy?" And then I looked up the Make Your Bed story, and I found it, and I watched it. And I now watch that maybe like once a month. I'll go back and I'll watch it, because
His speech. Watch his
the
speech,
Make Your Bed
yeah.
commencement speech. Have you seen it? Yeah. So I'll go back and watch it, because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, I never quite understood how that one speech, his simple approach to things, just resonates with everybody. And we had a conversation today where I'm answering some of your questions with probably the simplest responses you'll get in some of these. And that's kind of how I feel about watching him speak his speech, the Make Your Bed speech. Because I thought to myself, in that moment, standing there talking to retired Navy Admiral William McCraven, he was giving me advice that he was giving a crowd of thousands at UT Austin in a short conversation with him, and then said, "You belong here." And ever since then, I think I knew that at some point I would go back and I would do my PhD program. But yeah, I mean, it's at over 300 comments and 5,000 likes, and people were just so amazed by the story. And I was like, this guy's not even on social media. He's never going to see this. So one time I emailed him and I said, "Check this out." And he was like, "Thank you for sharing, Geremy." Like, very simple. He's a very simple guy. Like, for being all the things that he has done,
He's a
very
stud,
simple
man.
guy.
Yeah.
Very simple guy. Yeah.
And the role he held, and I mean, if he should have ran for. Everybody thought he was going to run for president.
Yep. So yeah, that was my.
Wish he would have. Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty good reading list. Favorite podcast?
You would be so surprised. It's called Dolly Parton's America, and it's not necessarily about Dolly Parton, but it is. But if you listen to one episode, I promise, if you listen to one episode, you will have the urge to listen to the whole thing. You will want to hear the whole thing. Even more so if you like Dolly Parton. But I didn't even like Dolly Parton as an artist before I learned.
I love Dolly
listened
Parton.
but before I listened to this podcast, I wasn't a big fan. Now I hope Dolly Parton lives forever because the impact that she's had on the world is way further reaching than what most people will give her credit for.
Right. She's so relatable.
She's
so
very
human.
relatable. But on top of that, the other favorite podcast, I'm gonna get in trouble for this too. Half of the things I said today, I'll get in trouble for. But other favorite podcast is The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill.
Of who?
Mars Hill.
Who's Mars Hill?
You know what Hillsong is?
Hillsong United?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the church, right?
Okay, I know where we're going with this. Yeah. They had some problems.
So okay, but yeah, well, Mars Hill was one of the first mega churches ever.
Oh, okay.
And they're like this story, this Rise and Fall of Mars Hill is it's a podcast by Christianity Today, so it's not an anti-Christian podcast of any sort, but it does give a really good understanding of what happens inside these mega churches and how sometimes people are led astray, and what that does to communities and how that impacts and people, and how people as leaders come into spaces and they're listened to and they're understood, but then at the same time they are impactful in a positive way and a negative way. The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill you have to listen to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill the same way as Dolly Parton's America. They're just podcasts that I think shed so much light on so much more than what you would think.
So they're like 1 episode, 10 episodes, or they're continuing?
Yeah, they're no. So Dolly
like
Parton's
a series,
America is like a mini series.
Okay.
It's like 6 or 7 or something, and they're about 1 hour. And then The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill is another one that's I think maybe 10 episodes, something like that. But both of those podcasts will impact your way of thinking about those topics. And I think that it's worth. I re-listen to both of those podcasts at least once a year, and I learn something new each time.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, those are good ones. When I first started the podcast and I downloaded this AI tool, I forgot what it was, but it's like my first intro video. I was like, the Jesus Rendon podcast. What's a good title for it? Let's get ratings, and then all of them. The Rise and Fall of Jesus Rendon. The serial criminal Jesus Rendon. It's like, man, those were like 99. And it didn't work out to me. I was like, maybe we'll get another AI tool.
Yeah, no, those are.
But with Rise and Fall, every time I think about that, I'm like, that's such a hook.
The other one is more like one that has an episode every week. It's called Throughline. It's a history. It contextualizes today's modern movements, things that are happening now in history. So, we think war with Iran is new, but it's not. We think, all these things that are happening right now, it really gives you a way to contextualize it.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing Geremy Landin could change today about himself, what would it be?
What would it be? I sometimes let my emotions change my plans more often than I would want them to. Yeah. If I could change that, I would do that. Because half the time I'm sitting there thinking, man, I should have still done that anyway.
But you still went to Mexico.
I still went to Mexico. I still went to Hawaii. I still did those things because I was like, you know what? Again,
I'm going to change that today.
Yeah. I mean, and at times it's kind of like, am I really going to go through this? Like, or am I going to let it affect my day that way or my year that way? And there's times where you just have to sit there and say, you know what? It's not worth it. But there are times where it is worth it and you do have to adjust and you have to recognize it. And sometimes it's hard to see which one is the right one.
But you got to remove yourself. Remember, make these hard decisions, remove yourself, third person.
Yeah. And that's what I've tried to do over time. And I've done it in some cases and in some cases I have not. But for the most part, I think I would not go back and do anything differently than what I've done them so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you promoting?
Promoting? I mean, naturally, right? I'm wanting people to get engaged with the two things that I've recently started. So, Rise is not new as a concept. The nonprofit status is new, but it's been around for decades. And Lumos is new as a concept and new as a small business strategy, but my work helping small businesses is not new at all. Back to when I was working with my parents, and I was 12 or 13 making invoices for them, for subdivisions they were working for. I've been working with small businesses since I was a kid. I would go walk around job sites with 5-gallon buckets of paint, like, as a kid. Like, I may work at a computer right now, but I promise you I can find my way around a construction site. And usually that surprises people. They're like, I didn't expect that. But I'm like, don't judge me just because I have a computer in front of me. Like, who do you think did stuff on my house? Like, I walked in one day and just took a sledgehammer and started knocking walls down and was like, I hope that there's no beam up there. Sure enough, there wasn't, but still, But yeah, I hope that people will say, hey, I want to work with you. You're practical and you show results. Let's work together. And then I hope people will say, wait, I am of a Spanish-speaking diaspora. I'm of, this culture. My parents may have, enjoyed the style of music you were referring to, and I don't want it to die with me. Here's $10. Here's $20. Here's $50. Because that is something that is not for my generation that we'll see in some future. It's not even something that Esmeralda's generation will see, right? It could be her kids or my grandkids or somebody else in the future that I want to build that for. Yeah.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
If you put a light in the sky, I'm just kidding. So you can text me, email me, call me. I'll give you all my information so you can put it there. But phone number, email. I'm pretty responsive on everything. And if I don't,
he's probably salsa dancing.
I'm probably salsa.
Don't get mad when
that
you
is
see
exactly
his video.
what
When
I
you
was
see
about
his
to
video
say.
on YouTube and Facebook, if you really want to go over there and get him and have a meeting with him there.
Yeah, I have worked on my computer at Salsa Socials. Yeah.
Nice. Geremy, I'm since the first time I met you, you were the most sincere candidate then. Both elections, you were a big component. I mean, dare I say you were the leading force that turned Maestro around and got that place going and into the engine that it is now. And the people you've worked with personally, from on a person to person basis, I've only ever heard good things. I appreciate you coming by the rec today and sharing some of your knowledge and experiences, and I'm excited for your new endeavors that are coming, and I know it's only going to go up from here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you, brother.